About a week ago, I did a speedrun from Open Division to Champ Division, but I was on old gen console, keyboard, and mouse. A lot of people asked me to take some of the clips from that speedrun and break them down on how I outplayed opponents that had better mechanics than me. So in this video, I'm going to be doing that, plus a little extra. Before we get into the actual breakdowns of clips where I use these strategies, I want to talk about them first so that you guys can get an understanding of these ideas. Before we hop into the video, please consider using code JivanTV in the Fortnite item shop, or at least make sure you're using somebody's code because it helps us out a ton. Without further ado, let's get into this video. The first and obvious thing you're going to need to outplay players that are better than you is God tier aim. Without aim, you're not going to be able to end any fights, so you need to make sure you're practicing your aim almost every day, if not every day. Let's say a really good player pieces you up and you can't hit a shot on them, you're going to die. Let's say you piece a player up and you can't hit a shot on them, you're going to die. Kind of obvious, you need good aim. So that's step number one to outplaying players better than you. The next big thing you need is patience. A lot of times players die because they either rush their shots, rush plays, or don't take time to really track the opponent and see what they're doing. So patience is crucial to outplaying other players. One situation where this comes into effect is in a box fight scenario. A lot of times players will start to panic in a box fight and just jump in the enemy's box and initiate a 50-50. Rather than doing that, instead of jumping at the player, branch out the back and make extra room for yourself to move. Be super patient and wait for the enemy to mess up. Wait for them to either push your wall without anything in their box, you'll be able to piece control them if they do that, or wait for them to psycho into your box and you can have your shot lined up ready to go if they do that. There's so many ways to outplay an opponent, but without patience, you're not going to be able to pull off hardly any of these moves. One big way that I outplay players who are better than me is with the element of surprise. Let's say they're just chasing me, trying to edit course me, absolutely piecing up everything, and I'm just running for my life, creating box after box, trying to get away. Eventually, if the opponent just keeps chasing you and you keep running, you might be able to just completely turn around on them really quickly and jump in their face, and they won't expect it at all. A lot of times they'll have their builds out, trying to piece you up, trying to catch up to you as you tunnel away, and so simply turning around and bodying them can really catch them off guard, and this has happened countless times for me. One big thing you need to keep on your mind if you're running away from the opponent, creating box after box, is you gotta keep in mind where the enemy is positioned, where they're chasing you from. That way you don't lose track of them, because you might be so caught up into tunneling that you tunnel right into them and they're just waiting for you. So keep your eyes on the enemy. The fourth thing, which is so crucial, especially for high ping players, is understanding how to counter peek. Counter peeking is basically when the enemy sets up a right hand peek on you, you counter peek it by hugging a wall or hiding behind a cone. That way they can't get an angle on you, and when they jump to take their peek shot, you can take a counter peek shot. Anytime an opponent makes an edit on me to take a shot, I'm always looking for the most safe place to hide to counter peek. You'll see some really good examples of this later in this video, but I just wanted to throw that out. That's one of the big things you need to understand. And then next up is just a last resort. If you're completely outmatched and have no other options, you can try to launch pad away, run away, car away, cow away, whatever it is. But you gotta know that the opponent usually is not going to stop chasing you. So this makes it really tough, especially if you launch, because they can just like shoot you out of the air if you're weak. What I tried to do a lot during the console video was either last as long the fight as I can and hope a third party shows up if I'm super outmatched and can't get anything done. I'd try to use the third party to save me. I try to get the third party to fight the opponent. The way I do this is I try to see which way the third party is coming from and position myself on the opposite side of the person I'm fighting. That way the third party runs straight into the guy I'm fighting. That way it gives me a chance to heal up, and then I can turn into the third party, and as soon as I hear them in like a 50-50 scenario, I jump in. And something else that works just as well is if you try to run away from a fight, immediately run the enemy into another fight. If you see people fighting close by, you're completely outmatched, run to that fight, go on the opposite side of the fight so the enemy thinks you're in that fight, and you can drive the enemy towards them and become the third party. Alright, time for some in-game examples. The first one we got here is an example of being patient and waiting for the enemy to slip up. In this situation, when that happened was at the very start of the fight, right here. I see the enemy double smack my wall. When he does that, I get a pre-fire off and I have the advantage in the fight. From there on out, I just had to chase him down and clean it up. In this next scenario, my opponent was super aggressive. Knowing that, I let him psycho into my box and I backed up while I did it. I let him run into all of my builds and then set up a peek from the outside. If I would have hit shots earlier on, I would have finished that faster, but regardless, he psychoed into all my builds and all I had to do was set up peeks to finish it. Now earlier I talked about counter peeking. Here are two really good examples of it. In this first example, you can see that the opponent got me full boxed, and so I immediately work my way to the back of the cone right here. By ducking behind the cone like this, I make it so the opponent has no visual on me, and I can take a peek shot from behind the cone to finish the fight. That's the idea of counter peeking, taking away the opponent's view of you so that you're safe and maybe they'll psycho in like this person did and you can get free shots. Even though the opponent completely boxed me here, I won the fight. So if you get pieced up a lot, definitely practice these techniques. And if you die in scenarios like this, see how you could have counter peeked differently to give yourself more of an advantage. So right here's another really good example of a counter peek. In this situation, the opponent didn't psycho in on me. Instead, he was setting up peeks from the outside. So because the opponent's wall is metal here, anytime he edits it, it's going to be one shot. So what I do in this situation is duck behind my cone and shoot their wall from a distance and try to take it. That way they don't have much of an angle on me and I can regain the advantage in the fight and finish it. So now that we went over those counter peek methods, we're going to get into some of these console clips. So in this first clip that we're going to break down, I use a great peek method that I use all the time. If you hug all the way against your wall while setting up a peek like this, you can oftentimes deal much more damage than you take because the opponent usually doesn't see it coming. You gotta hug all the way against your wall though. I included this next clip because I just wanted to show that oftentimes you can win fights from simply having good aim and good tracking in a fight. In this clip, I hardly built at all. I simply tracked the opponent's positioning, tried to get sneaky angles on them without even really building much. I included this next collage of clips from Lazy Lake because I was on one in these fights. People say it's hard to keep up with PC players when you're on console, but really you just gotta bring the energy to the fight. If you have the mechanics, you practice in creative all the time, and you have those instincts and reflexes built, a lot of times it's really a mentality thing that's holding you back. Whether it be, oh, I can't keep up with these players, whatever it is, you gotta just snap out of it and try your best every game. Bring the energy. It is crucial. I pieced up so many kids here on PS4 keyboard and mouse with the input delay. It is doable, I promise. So this next clip is a major way to outplay players. In this clip, I predicted the opponent's edit, I predicted the direction he was going to go, and because of that, I was able to get a free shot to clean up the fight. If you can get to the point where you predict an enemy's movements, you'll be able to catch them off guard a lot, simply by holding angles. This clip is another example of that. I simply held an angle while this person was ramp rushing me and got a big damage shot to start the fight. Just make sure the angles you're holding are right-hand peaks. So this next fight here was going on for so long, I felt outmatched, but I was being patient with it. Eventually, I saw the enemy mess up by standing on my floor, so I dropped him down here, completely threw off his mojo in this fight, and just jumped on his head to finish it. This next clip is a great example on how to outplay opponents based on positioning. I knew there were two players left, so I launchpad to the back of this guy's box because I knew the other player was on the other side. By doing that, I pinched this player in his box and give him really nowhere to go. The positioning was everything. And then to kill the last player, I did the technique we were just talking about, holding angles on the opponent. Notice how I tracked his movement and just held that right hand peek and he jumped right into my shot. Perfect. Next scenario happens all the time. If you get the opponent coned in a box above you, spray their floor and they'll be forced to drop down. And then you can just box them up from there and set up peaks. They can't hold the floor when they're in a cone, they'll phase right through it. Then I cleaned them up a little bit later. This next example is the thing I was talking about earlier where you're tunneling away from your opponent so much that they think you're just going to keep on running, and then you randomly turn around and surprise them, catching them completely off guard and clap their cheeks. That's what I did here and it worked perfectly, as you can see. And then this last clip you're going to see during the outro is simply me running away from an opponent and running him into another player. I did this a lot in late game when I was doing the console speedrun. When I was outmatched and knew I was going to die to a player, I would just run him into another enemy, and a lot of times I would get away or turn into the third party. But yeah, hopefully this video helped you guys understand how you can outplay better players when you feel really outmatched. If it did, be sure to hit that like button, sub if you're new, use code JivanTV, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.